everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. So this year has been a bit of a weird one, and as we come towards the end of the year, I kind of wanted to give a bit of a update on me, my training, my health, how this last year has gone, because most of you will know that for the past 2 years or something I've been suffering from an illness, a chronic illness called Epstein-Barr virus, same illness that Mark Cavendish had, and that's kind of common in young athletes. Not that I'm that young anymore, but I have kind of glossed over that these recent weeks and months, and I feel like I've been moving into doing more races, more challenges, more training certainly, and I haven't really given an update of all of my health things, and a few people have been asking me over on Instagram, and I also know that chronic illness of this variety is so common. So contrary to the very negative media that we sometimes get around this, and the fact that a lot of people unfortunately really do never recover from this kind of thing, I wanted to share a more positive story, my story, with the caveat that just because it happens this way for me, you know, everyone is completely unique, and I just wanted to share a little bit more about it, and also share some exciting things that I've got coming up next year, because I think, as well as looking at the past and things that may have gone wrong, I think it's also really important to look to the future with positivity and hope and optimism is the goal. So yeah, that's what this video is about, and I wanted to kind of give also some stats around my own training and what I've been doing this past year and how that has looked for me. So to give you some context, I got glandular fever in December of 2022, and that caused some long-lasting issues in the form of EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, which for me at least, my first symptoms were fatigue and then heart palpitations and then extreme fatigue, to the point that getting up the stairs after a run would be problematic, and I just have to go to sleep downstairs in the sitting room. And I was also just struggling to do even really basic runs. By the end of, like, when I actually kind of stopped doing harder runs, I literally would go out for like a 5k easy and my heart rate would immediately jump to 180. So it was very frustrating. It was also really worrying. But if you want more information about what actually happened, there's an amazing film that I made in partnership with this videographer, Northern Goose, and that is called EBV and Me, and I would really recommend going and watching that. I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but basically that happened. It was crap. At the time I was training for an 100km race called the Lakes Traverse. You can go and watch my DNF of that if you would like to go and do that, and that was on the 1st of April 2023, and I was trying to maintain these kind of 50 to 60km weeks at the time. The year previously that had been kind of my standard week, 50-60 kilometers. I actually struggled to do much higher mileage than that anyway, so I was just trying to maintain that, but I'd never done 100k before, so I was really kind of trying to push myself. And in hindsight, I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? But in hindsight, obviously pushing yourself when you have a virus is a terrible idea, but I didn't know I had a virus. I thought I had a cold basically, and I pushed through it, and it caused all these long-term issues. Obviously that isn't gonna happen for everyone. I think it was just a bit of bad luck. It was also a difficult time of year. It's in the lead up to Christmas. Christmas is exhausting anyway. Then when you add the pressure and the stress, both physical and mental, of training for a 100km race at the same time, it's bound to put your body under a lot of pressure. And anyway, that's what happened to me, and it was crappy, and I basically stopped running entirely. I had a bit of a resurgence in like June of that year after doing terribly in my 3 spring races. I had a bit of a resurgence in June, July, and then completely dropped off a cliff until I ran OCC as part of UTMB week, which is a 55km mountain race, and then I got my diagnosis after that. So throughout all of this, I'd been getting these heart palpitations and extreme fatigue and all these kind of things, and just trying to manage it, because every test that I'd gone through at the doctors had said, there is no problem, you're absolutely fine, you know, your body's under a bit of stress, but it'll be okay, blah, blah, blah. No diagnosis for 9 months, and then, oh, by the way, you have Epstein-Barr virus. I hope you're not, you know, pushing your body at all. And of course, I'd been training for all of these ultra marathons and mountain races and adventure races and all these kind of things, and anyway, wouldn't recommend doing that. It did not end very well for me. Between the end of August 23 and kind of December, I guess, I did pretty much nothing. I really had to take a step back. Even if I hadn't got that diagnosis, I think my body was pretty much done with me. It was fed up of being pushed to the extremes, and I just took like quite a lot of time off, a few months off entirely, a couple of like jogs to the gym to do like a stretching session and then a jog back. That's a mile, so not particularly far compared to the high level of training that I was keeping up before. But then on to kind of recovery sides of things. So this year I was asked at the beginning of the year, actually at the end of last year, if I wanted to run Paris Marathon in April. And one thing I had found with my training while I had EBV but was still doing my training is that zone 2 training, so nice easy conversational paced training, didn't actually trigger me too much so long as I rested for a day in between each training session. So one training session, a day off, then another training session. And I could kind of do that so long as I wasn't overloading my body at any point. So no fast running, no hills, no 2 training sessions in a row, no gym work, like bare minimum. So I thought actually a marathon, it's flat for starters, it's consistent pace, so I'm not spiking my heart rate at any time. I thought, well, I can give it a go, and I never really knew whether I was going to be able to make it to the start line, let alone the finish line, but I really wanted to try and build up my fitness, because something I did find is that when my fitness got to a really low level for me, I actually found really simple day-to-day tasks quite a lot harder. So when I was doing loads of training, although I was absolutely dead and just broken all the time, compared to my actual training, going and washing my hair or doing the cooking or doing a little bit of cleaning around the house wasn't too physically taxing for me. But at the point that I actually stopped doing all of my training and lost that fitness, even really basic stuff was completely exhausting me. So I wanted to build up like a really consistent like base level of fitness, and it is tough building up from scratch when you're used to being able to run 6 times a week and do gym sessions as I was back in 2022 and 2021. It's really tough to be like consistent but not over or underdoing 3 runs a week. I actually found it very, very difficult, but as you can tell, and probably as you already know because the vlogs are already out, I did do Paris Marathon and it didn't go nearly as badly as I expected. I managed to make it to the finish line. I did a time that is entirely respectable for anyone. It was like 4:20 something or other. Not too far off my road marathon personal best. So I was really happy with that, and it was a very, very emotional experience for me because I guess I didn't just have the physical struggles, and this is obviously a sign. If you can run a marathon, you must have a certain level of fitness. That's pretty impressive for anyone to do. But also the kind of emotional, God, it's actually making me kind of emotional talking about it. If you've been through something, okay, this is something that everyone can experience. If you've been through injury, you get this fear that if you know, get back to running too quickly, or even if you're following a plan, that you're going to injure yourself again. And especially if it's a recurrent injury, it really gets in your head, like it's some sort of psychological turmoil every time you go running. So I had exactly the same with EBV recovery. I was so worried that every time I ran, it would make me really ill again and that I wouldn't be able to do anything and I just have to spend all my time on the sofa. But doing that marathon kind of proved to myself that I was capable. Oh my God. Oh, crazy. It's funny how emotional it is, even though that was back in April. All right, give me a second. Sorry, I gotta compose myself. Doing, oh my God. Oh, that's embarrassing. Doing that marathon proved to myself that I wasn't like completely done as an athlete, as a runner, as me and my entire personality. And so that was actually really important for me to be able to do, even though medically speaking it was probably a terrible idea. When I think when you get a chronic illness, only part of it is the physical side, and I think the whole other side of it is the psychological side. And you can't just wrap yourself in cotton wool or bubble wrap and lie on the sofa all day every day. Like, that's not living. And some days you do have to do that because you're forced to do that, but for me at least, having the opportunity to get back to doing something that I love was of vital importance to me. And even though that didn't look like, you know, pushing myself too much, it didn't look like bashing up against my like full-on limitations, which is those are the two things that I really love to do. I just really like to see where my limits are. You know, running a slowish marathon for me is not pushing my limits. However, proving to myself that I can still run and that I am capable of hard things, even if that takes the form of, you know, a marathon time that the year previously I would not have been happy with. That was really important to me. So anyway, whoa, oh, it's a real surprise. Ugh. Anyway, I did that marathon, and the recovery after that was yeah, there was a bit of fallout from it, as expected. I didn't feel entirely terrible. I didn't feel nearly as bad as I felt after OCC the year before, but I did take off 10 weeks of just like doing whatever felt good, basically. So I wasn't sticking to 3 runs a week. I wasn't, you know, going to the gym a certain amount of times. I was really like allowing myself to kind of recover, basically, like allowing both my body and my brain to chill out a little bit, because like I said, you know, the psychological stress of running when you know that running could be the thing that actually takes you back to square one with your recovery. Yeah, I really needed that time off, and that was so lovely and so necessary, and I really do recommend that after a really hard training block anyway, like no matter whether you've actually gone through an injury or illness or whatever. And then I was asked if I wanted to do Oxford Half Marathon, and again this was with Runner, who I've been working with for like 3 years. So unfortunately for them, I was ill for quite a lot of that time, but they've been really good at like keeping me on board as an ambassador, and I've seen their product go from, you know, a very good but kind of relatively basic AI training plan to a really comprehensive, ticks all the boxes, does exactly what you want it to, completely customizable training plan where you can add things like strength and conditioning training. You can alter the schedule to suit your day. You can do any race of any distance. It doesn't just have to be like a 10k half marathon or marathon. So yeah, it was really nice to be able to say yes to doing Oxford Half. And with this one, I learned my lesson about the last one. And this was something that was recommended to me by another person with chronic fatigue, actually. She said that when she is training for a race, obviously you don't know necessarily when you're gonna have a kind of relapse of chronic fatigue or any chronic illness. But what she said is that she just left loads of extra time. So most training programs are 12 or 16 weeks. I left 20 weeks for a half marathon. I don't think I'd ever leave 20 weeks for a race. Maybe for the 100k, I would have left 20 weeks. I can't actually remember. I think I didn't even do that because I was coming off the back of like various ultras anyway. But I left so long to train for this 21k race. And when it actually came around, I'd had, I think, 2 down weeks. So one of them I had a cold, the other one was just a bit of fatigue and I didn't want to push myself. But by doing 20 weeks, and by scheduling in that extra time, it really allowed me to kind of relax into training and not worry like, oh, everything has to go perfectly. I have to get in my speed session every week. I have to do the long run at the weekend. I have to do XYZ every single week, otherwise it's not going to work. The great thing about doing it in 20 weeks is that you've got so much time to play with, and that just makes it a whole lot easier. And I think that worked really well for me, and for my races next year, I will absolutely be doing the same, because even if my recovery is pretty good right now, and we'll get onto that in a second, I don't want to risk the pressure of doing well in the race impacting my health in the long term. That's a hard line for me. I just don't want to ever let running get in the way of my health. Oxford Half went really well. I was not quite near a personal best, but I was only 3 minutes off, and that again was a real surprise for me. And one thing I found with my marathon training is that I really couldn't run more than 3 times a week. That was very much a limit, and so long as I had that rest day in between each of my days of running, I'd be absolutely fine. With Paris Marathon, I was doing 4 runs a week. I wasn't doing as high mileage, but I was consistently running 4 runs a week, except for those 2 ill weeks. And I think that allowed me to build up even more fitness than doing my high mileage 3 runs a weeks for my marathon training. So that was an interesting difference between those two. Also, for my Paris Marathon training, I could either run or I could work. And like, I just couldn't do both. My brain, my fatigue, whatever, would not allow me to do more than one thing a day. And so I'd do my run and then be absolutely like messed up for the rest of the day. And then the next day I could work because it would be a rest day. And it's not a very efficient way of working. You don't get very much work done, but I would just have to fit in work wherever I could, wherever I had the energy. And that was frustrating, but I have the real privilege of being able to kind of mostly organize my life around my running because it does make up so much of my job, and it was really important to me to actually allow myself those half days to recover after a run. But with Oxford Half training, I did actually find that I could do a run and then work later that day, and that may sound like a really small thing, but if you've ever experienced fatigue, you will know that having brain functioning and body functioning on the same day very rarely happens. So that was quite an important difference. Also, through all of this, I've been doing a house renovation, which I wouldn't recommend if you have chronic illness or any element of fatigue at all. It is truly exhausting. And while I will never complain about the immense privilege of being able to do a house renovation, it has been extremely tiring. And I think that has probably impacted my fatigue levels at certain points. But on the plus side on that, I had a complete revelation the other day. In our house, we used to have extremely bad black mold, and I actually am loath to say this because it's so disgusting and I really think that people might judge us heavily. We just had a serious damp problem. It was due to a leak in a kind of semi-external part of the house, and the water basically made its way onto the brickwork, and behind the washing machine, so we couldn't see it, there was an entire 2 walls of black mold. And as part of the renovation, we knocked that down. We got rid of it, the whole space. It was a health hazard even without the mold, and so we just got rid of it. Interestingly, within about 4 to 6 weeks of that happening, my EBV recovery just skyrocketed. I wasn't back to complete normality, but I really do feel like the mold was causing some of my problems. And a lot of you will be being like, yeah, duh, like that's so obvious, but I didn't really think about it because we were going to do that anyway, and so I hadn't thought like, oh, when that mold goes, my EBV will be better. I just hadn't even thought about it at all. The only reason I did think about it was because I was cleaning out a bird feeder a few weeks ago, and it had this like browny black sludge in the middle. It's because it had fallen down the back of something and we hadn't managed to clean it in ages. I hadn't found it. So I just was finding it, like cleaning the inside to make sure that it was safe for the birds, and it had all this mold in it, basically black mold. And within 15 minutes of doing that, my eyes were watering, my nose like was itching so much, and the rest of that day was a complete write-off for me. Like I was so fatigued for the first time in about 3 weeks on that day, and that just suddenly made me think like, oh my goodness, I wonder if the black mold was causing a huge amount of stress in my body, which is like slowing down my recovery. So anyway, that was an interesting revelation, and one that I wanted to share because certainly in this country we do have a big problem with bad insulation. We have a big problem with mold and drafty houses, and also people trying not to let any air in their houses because they're so cold, which obviously then causes like a lot of stagnant air and can be an issue with humidity. So yeah, I found that quite interesting. It's not a scientific experiment, it's just a thought, but it does kind of make some sense. So as I alluded to there, we're going to move on to how my recovery is doing now and what I'm training for and what I'm doing next year. As I alluded to, my recovery is so much better. After Paris Marathon, I took off about 10 weeks, having fun, doing nothing, having a proper relax. After Oxford Half, I felt fine. Like, I was tired for a couple of days, as I would usually expect after a flat out race, which at least half of Oxford Half was pretty flat out for me. And I just kind of recovered like normal. I think I found the socializing around the event more tiring than the actual running event itself, which is not entirely unusual for me. But literally after 2 days, I felt completely back to normal. And that is brilliant because one thing that I struggle with EBV is not the doing of the event, but the recovery afterwards. So like most of my runs I can do no problem, but actually recovering in time for the next run has always been the issue. So like maintaining a training plan in that sense can be really difficult because I will do the run, feel fine-ish on the run, and then not be able to recover in time for the next run, and then it all just falls apart. But yeah, after Oxford Half I felt really good, and then I did the run across Dartmoor because I was like, I really need an adventure, and you guys were so positive about that. I received loads of messages, and that was really nice. Hopefully I've encouraged some of you guys to do little mini adventures as well, and it was just a little way of testing myself slightly. I've been so scared of testing my body and like pushing myself from those first days of heart palpitations nearly 2 years ago, because it was so scary to get that, and I really thought like at some point that I might just drop dead midway through a run, and that's not a feeling that anyone wants to experience. So the Dartmoor thing was a real test because I hadn't run 2 big runs back to back in like a year and a half. So that was a bit mad, but so much fun. And again, although I actually kind of hurt my Achilles during that, but aside from that, I recovered within a week easily. And now I'm back to full training again. I did take a couple of weeks off after that, but now I'm back to full training, which means 4 runs a week and 2 strength training sessions a week if I can fit them in, but a minimum 1, and this is something that I haven't been able to keep up for the last year and a half. The plan that I'm doing at the moment is runner's functional fitness plan. I'm definitely more motivated for training when I'm training for a race, but what I want to see if I can do is build up a level of base fitness so that when I do actually do my races next year, I am able to kind of hit the ground running with that training and not like have to build up to a level of base fitness and then build upon that. I'm going to do the base fitness now before Christmas and before the new year, and then when it comes to the new year, that's when I'm really going to like do more specific training. But now I'm just getting strong and fast, hopefully. And this morning I did an interval session up at the track, and it was really fun. My heart rate was stupidly high, but I felt so good. And if you've ever taken interval training for granted and you've ever not thought, how cool is it that I can run this fast? Doesn't matter how fast. If it feels fast to you, it's fast. If you've never thought like how lucky you are to do that, please just think about it next time you're running fast, because I felt so good and I haven't felt like that in a very, very long time. So again, it was, oh my God. It was quite emotional. It was really, really fun though. It was so lovely. It was only 6 kilometers total, including the cool down. It was so good. But this is only week 2 of the training. It is an 8-week training block, and I plan to start the new year feeling very strong because in February, I am doing the Hampton Core Half with a pacer, and I'm gonna go for a personal best. And it feels very scary to be putting out a big goal like that on here so early before the race itself. I'm just gonna give myself the best chance of doing that. I'm not getting any younger. And I do feel like for the shorter distances, and I count half marathon as a shorter distance, just because I do ultra marathons, so it kind of, anything shorter than a half, like half and shorter, is fast for me. I just think those things are gonna get a lot harder as I get older, and I want to get in some speed before I turn 30, which is shortly after the race. And I'm hoping also, because I've never raced a half marathon without EBV, I've only done 1 half marathon race, I think it should be relatively okay for me to get a PB, and the best chance of me doing it is on a flat, fast course with someone to hurry me along throughout the race, also with crowds along the way, because the first half marathon that I did and the only other kind of race scenario half marathon I've done was by myself, and that was a struggle the whole way. And so I would really like to have some crowds this time. So that is happening in February, and then hopefully I'm also gonna have like a full spring season of racing for the first time successfully since 2022. I don't count last year as successful because it wasn't, it was awful. So yeah, I won't tell you any more than that because the other things are in the pipeline, but they're very exciting. There are some quite major races in there, but as with everything, and as I said earlier, it all depends on my health. It depends how I'm feeling, it depends how the training goes, and it's a kind of constant like re-evaluating how I am doing at that time during that race phase and kind of building phase to figure out what is feasible for me and for my body. With chronic illness and with Epstein-Barr, I don't really know about a lot of other chronic illnesses, but with Epstein-Barr, although you can kind of like recover from it, there's always a possibility that if you overstress your body, it's going to come back and cause potential issues. So obviously I don't want that to happen, and it's kind of always in the back of my head. So that is my priority, is like remain healthy. But my second priority is to be fast as and to get some PBs next year on the road and potentially delve off-road to some more hilly stuff. And on that note, I've been going back to the trails these last couple of weeks, and that is something that I hadn't been doing at all this year, because the hills and the difficult terrain tend to elevate my heart rate quite a lot. So if you look at my elevation graph on Strava, it is so funny. It's like flat, 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 and then the last couple of weeks like this. So that shows that I am back to trails, and I'm really, really loving it. I'm so slow up hills right now though, so there's a lot of work to be done on that kind of note. But also I'm back at the gym, and hopefully the strength gains there will really help transfer to being fast on the road, and then also my trail stuff and hill things as well. So anyway, that is a very long rambling update. I hope some of it was useful. I sort of gloss over talking about my recovery for EBV because A, I don't want to jinx it, and I do feel like if I say, oh yeah, I'm feeling really good at the moment, which I am by the way, that the next day I'm gonna be bedbound and, you know, feeling awful, and I'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have told anyone. And secondly, I also don't want people to think that that's it, like that's done, EBV's over, everything's a-okay, and I'll never get it again. Unfortunately, that's just not the reality of it, as far as I know. So I'm very cautious about talking about it. Oh, and thirdly, Anyway, thirdly, everyone's experience is different, and I also don't want to upset anyone else in the chronic health, like chronic illness community. It is a really difficult topic to talk about because some people do never recover. But I also want to show that it is possible to get to that kind of 95% stage, which is where I feel like I'm at now, which is so good. And such a relief, and I really feel very positive about that and about the future as well, which I think is important. Anyway, that is it for this week's vlog. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do come over and follow me over on Strava. We've got a little gang of you guys going now. It's like nearly 17,000 people over on there, and I share all of my training over there, including specific sessions and stuff that I get from the Runner app, which maybe could be useful for you. Also, if you did want to test out the Runner app, you just use the code Flora, and that gets you 2 weeks for free. Like I said, I've been working with them for like 3 years now, and that is because they're really good. I wouldn't do it otherwise. I use them to train for my road races, and they also have some trail stuff and like ultramarathon things on there as well. Yeah, so if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe. What was that? Silly puppy. If you did enjoy this video, please do hit the thumbs up button and also press subscribe, and I'll be back with you next week with some more running content. Thanks again and happy running. Bye!